In this lesson, we'll create a pastel landscape drawing of a field with a couple of trees in about an hour. Hello there everyone, Matt here with thevirtualinstructor.com, and in this lesson we're going to create a pastel landscape sketch. We're only going to spend about an hour on this drawing, but this landscape features some nice bright colors. We're going to take a look at the materials first, and then we'll get into the process. So let's go ahead and dive right in. In this lesson, we'll be working with Rembrandt pastels, and we'll be working on PastelMat paper, which is a wonderful surface that features a deceptively deep tooth, which will allow us to put lots of layers on the surface. We'll begin here by addressing the line of distant trees in the background. And we're going to start by just defining the line where those trees meet the edges of the field. We're going to start with a purple. Now, you can see in our reference that we have quite a bit of purples, greens, and some yellows. Now, we can kind of push that yellow to more of a yellow-orange and push for more of a secondary scheme where we're dealing with color relationships between purple, orange, and green. So we're going to try to pull that out a little bit more in this image. Now you can see I've gone back with a darker gray. This is more of a cooler gray. It leans a little bit more towards blue. And we're going to establish some of the shadowed areas in the distant tree line before establishing a base application for the shadowed areas of the grassy field. After that, we're going to take a dark brown and start figuring out the shapes for the two dominant trees in the middle ground. Then we'll go back with a bit of purple and go back over the top of the distant tree line, adding a little bit more variety in the color. This purple is a little bit different. It's more of a red purple. Now, for now, we'll go ahead and establish some of the grass in the field. We'll do so with a yellow-green here initially, and you can see that most of my strokes here are horizontal. This is because the field is more of a horizontal shape, working its way across the picture plane. Then for a bit of variety, we'll add a slightly lighter yellow-green over the top. Now, at this beginning stage, we're just establishing shapes of color and value. In fact, that's what we're going to be focused on throughout this process, paying attention to the shapes of color and value and continually layering applications of the pastel on the surface. As you can see here, I've used a darker, cooler green and now more of a medium green, more like a Kelly green over the top. Variety in our color is important, and the way that we create that variety in color is through layering and mixing. But in these beginning stages, we're just laying down base applications using shapes to figure out our composition. Now we've gone back to that dark brown that we used to establish the shapes of the trees, and we're adding some hints of where we see darker value or shadow in the lower part of the picture plane here in the foreground. These marks are loose and quick in these beginning stages. We're not going to be concerned about the details. Again, we're only concerning ourselves with shapes of color and value. Now we're going to use a yellow. This is quite a warm yellow. It's more of a yellow-orange, as I mentioned before, and we're going to go ahead and cover the shape of the field going right over the top of the applications of the dark brown that we've applied. Some mixing will occur as we layer this color over the top, but we can also encourage more mixing by using our finger to blend these applications in areas where it feels suitable. Now we'll add just a bit of green and a bit of purple down here in the lower left-hand corner where we see the road, and we can really see these colors stand out. A lot of times artists see these colors but choose to leave them out, especially beginning artists. It's important to pay attention to the colors that you see, and even though they might be a little bit subtle, you can bring out a little bit more boldness in your art by pulling out a more brilliant version of the color that you see. Now a bit of a minty green is applied before going over the top of the shaded area in the distant background here with a bit more purple. Now we'll return to the distant trees and we'll start refining this area. I'm going to start with just a touch of black. Now black is a very strong color, and in all my pieces I don't necessarily use black. I use black only occasionally, and I only use it as a mixed version of a color. So I'm laying down this black, but I'm going to go back over the top of it with additional applications to tone it down a little bit. Black is such a strong color that it can make an image appear flat and unnatural, so we have to be careful with our black applications.
We'll go ahead and lay down some pink in areas where the light is filtering through as well. And we'll use this pink throughout the process, especially here in the background, to indicate areas of light. Now we'll go back over the top with a bit of green, and now we're starting to add some of the local color that we actually see in the piece over the top of these purple applications. Then it's back with more purple, again toning down these applications and continuing the layering process, which is going again to build up depth and color. You really have to be patient with your applications here as we continue to add a little bit more black and allow the image to emerge from the surface. If you're used to working with mediums like colored pencils or pen and ink, you really get immediate feedback when you make your marks on your surface and you see more of the finished product. But with a medium like pastels, you do have to work slowly and again layer your applications to make it resemble more of a painting. And this is just the nature of this particular medium. It is more of a painting medium, even though we're applying the medium to the surface as a dry medium. It's important to spend a few minutes at the beginning of the process, like we are here, establishing the shapes of color and value before progressing on to pulling out some of the details. Now, at this point, we're starting to pull out some of those details in the distant tree line as we continue to switch back and forth between the pinks, the light greens, and some of the darker tones as well to establish some of those tree trunks and bits of light filtering through the trees. We'll also add a bit of blue here to create, again, more variety, but also to make these trees look like they're off in the distance and also add some coolness to the shaded areas that exist back here. Now a little bit of a lighter purple is added, again establishing some of the tree trunks. Purple might seem like an unexpected color to use here, but you can really use any color that you wish, just as long as the value matches what you see in the reference. And as we continue to layer colors, you can see that we're starting to fill in the tooth or texture of the paper. And now some bits of the paper are still showing through, but you'll see that we cover those up as we continue to layer applications. Now a very light yellow-green is added over here where we see the light filtering through. And we're starting to see that contrast in value, and we're starting to understand the light just a little bit more in the scene. We'll continue to refine this background area, continuing to add lighter and darker versions of our colors. And here a bit more pink is added, again to indicate that light filtering through these tall trees. A bit more of the darker blue is added, and now you can see just how much variety we have in that color in the background. We'll add some more shaded areas, again with the black with a very light touch. And then we'll tone that down again with a bit more of the purple over the top. We'll bring some of that blue down into the shadowed areas where the grassy area meets the tree line. And now we're establishing a stronger line or a stronger edge between the distant trees and the grassy field. Speaking of the grassy field, we'll go ahead and move our way down to the middle ground here, adding a bit more green. And we'll add this green in areas where the light is filtering through the distant trees and landing on the grassy field. The lighter green, warmer areas are going to translate as areas of highlight, and the cooler, darker areas are going to translate as areas of shadow. This, of course, will create more of the impression of light in the background. We'll move down to where the shadow meets the lighter area here, and this edge is pretty strongly defined, continuing with the lighter yellow-green. We'll also establish some lines for that road. I guess we'll call that a road off in the distance, using a dark brown. Now it's time to establish some of the colors and values that exist on the tree. We have darker shapes in place, and over the top of these darker shapes, we're going to start applying a variety of different greens and other colors as well. We'll start with a darker yellow-green before progressing over to a warmer and redder brown here, establishing the shadowed areas. On our second tree, we'll do the same thing, starting with a medium yellow-green here. Then we'll establish the trunks of the trees using a dark brown. And I'm using the edge of the pastel here, so I have a little bit more control and can create a line. We'll do the same on the second tree here, and this darker brown is also going to make the shadow a little bit darker as well. Now we'll add a little bit of blue here. This is going to add some coolness to the shadow. It's going to increase the depth in the color as well and make our image more interesting. We'll do the same on our second tree here with the blue. And using the blue, we'll establish some of the shadowed parts underneath the tree as well. Now we'll get back to this demonstration in a moment, but I want to tell you about a live lesson series that we have over at thevirtualinstructor.com where we create an entire pastel drawing from start to finish. Now, of course, this isn't a quick sketch. This lesson series contains 7 lessons, which are presented in real time. So you can create your own drawing alongside of me if you wish. You'll learn how to layer colors after creating a base application or an underpainting of shadows and develop a pastel drawing completely with a very detailed layered approach. Now, this live lesson series is part of the membership program, but I'll leave a link to this specific live lesson series if you want to check it out in the description below. Now back to the lesson. Now we'll continue here, again with a darker brown, just refining some of those branches and also some of those tree trunks. We're not going to get too concerned with the details. Instead, we're going to allow this image to be more of a painterly image, so our details are going to be insinuated and understood by the viewer in the end. We'll do the same with the other 2 small trees. I guess these are 2 small trees on the left. Again, establishing those shapes for the trunks and the branches, before switching over to a much lighter yellow-green, and this is where we're going to establish those highlights around the edges of the tree. Now, our light source is coming from the upper right-hand corner, but it's coming from behind the subject. So the light source is actually directly facing the viewer. This is producing areas of coarse shadow in the middle of the trees, areas of highlight around the edges of the trees, and then cast shadows right underneath the trees. So we're going to establish this relationship between lights and darks, and we're going to do so by continuing to layer both dark and light applications. You can see our initial applications with the light yellow-green are a little bit sharp and too contrasting. So we go back around the edges again with a softer application, blurring that out to a certain degree or smudging it to a certain degree with just another application of the pastel. We can add some stronger highlights here and there for variety before going back with a darker yellow-green into some of the middle values in shadowed areas on the tree. We'll do the same on our second tree. Again, just easing that transition a little bit, making sure that contrast is not too sharp and strong. And as we do so, you can see that the contrast is toned down quite a bit and softened to a degree as well. Now a little bit of a cooler green in areas. Again, this is for variety in the color. We see so many colors as human beings. It's easy to get overwhelmed, but it's also easy for us to simplify what we see when we're replicating what we see in a drawing or painting. That's why it's essential to continue to layer colors using different versions and different varieties of the color in order to create a representational effect in the final piece. Now, a little bit of black is used here. Again, it's super strong. So after we apply this black, making the shadow as dark as we need it to be, we can go back over the top of it and soften it with additional applications of greens. You can see here just how strong that black is on our second tree. If we chose to leave that, it would definitely look unnatural. So we'll go back over the top with a darker and cooler green here. Again, this is another green for added variety. But as we go back over the black applications, you can see that that application is softened and it appears a lot more natural. Now with a darker brown, we'll establish some of the shadows, and then actually with a darker green, we'll go back over the top of the shadowed shapes over the top of the yellow part of the field. Now we're using a green here instead of a black or a brown because it's going to appear more natural, and it will also make our shadow appear a little bit cooler as well. Now with that very light yellow-green, there are some bits of light making their way into the middle portion of the tree, so we'll add those, and we'll also add a few more indications of some stronger highlight here and there. Slowly and gradually, our scene is starting to make sense. But as you can see, even though this is just a 1-hour sketch, I'm still taking my time and making sure that I develop each section of the painting completely before moving on to the next. We're working our way from the top of the picture plane down to the bottom of the picture plane. Because pastels are an opaque medium, we can go over the top of applications that we already have in place. So it makes sense to work from the background to the middle ground to the foreground, essentially working from the top of the picture plane down to the bottom of the picture plane. This allows us to overlap elements of the middle ground over the top of the background, so we don't have to go back into the background and work around what we've applied in the foreground and middle ground. Now, at this point, I see I need to make the shadow just a little bit darker, so I'm using a very light touch here with black to make the shadow just a bit stronger before going back over the top of it with a darker, cooler green to tone it down. A couple of more marks are added here with a middle green, indicating some of the light making its way to the middle of the tree. And then we're going to add just a little bit of purple here as well. Now, when you use one color within a composition, it's usually a good idea to add it into other areas within the composition. So we're using the purple not only in the background, but also in the middle ground and the foreground so that our finished image is harmonious. Now with a dark, cooler gray, we're going to bring that road. I hesitate calling it a road. It's more like a pathway for cars or trucks. We'll go ahead and draw the lines there for this. And then we're going to tone it down again with a little bit of a green over the top, a little bit of a lighter green. And then we'll bring out some of the light areas here in the middle ground with a very light yellow-green. Again, you can see how much variety we've built up here in the middle ground with just a variety of yellow greens. We'll bring a little bit of that minty green in for additional pop, especially here in the middle ground. And we're going to use it primarily where the shadow meets the area of highlight in that field. Now I'm going to use a little bit of that yellow that we used initially for the shape of the yellow part of the field over the top of the green shadows that we've created here, toning them down and making them appear a bit more natural. And then we'll bring out a little bit of the highlight here in the yellow section of the field with a lighter yellow. Again, most of my strokes are predominantly horizontal in this area since this shape is mostly horizontal. We'll bring in a little bit of purple here. Again, you can see that little strip that I added on the right side of the picture plane, how dark it is and how not quite purple it is in the reference. So I'm bringing out a little bit more purple in my drawing so that my image pops a little bit more and is more interesting. We'll go ahead and address the shadowed area in the foreground here with that road. This is more of a road here in the foreground. Has that shadowed edge where the field of flowers is a little bit raised from the ground. So that shadow is incredibly important in creating the illusion of form. And then over the top, we'll add a little bit of yellow before switching over to a yellow ochre, adding variety here in the foreground, the extreme foreground. Typically, we see more contrast in value in the foreground, and you can see that in the reference where we see more definition and more darker values as we get closer to the viewer. So we're going to apply that yellow ochre more so in the extreme foreground. Then for additional contrast and variety, we'll add a bit of that light yellow in areas, pulling out some of the highlights in the yellow part of the field. Now, You may have guessed this at this point, or you may already know, but we don't have to be so tied to the photo reference. You can see that our drawing resembles the reference, but what we've created here is totally unique to the reference as well. We're not trying to replicate every single detail that we see in the photo reference, not by a long shot. Instead, we're focusing on shapes of color and value. And I've repeated that many times throughout this video, but it is so important to keep this in mind when working with pastels. At this point, we've got quite a bit of variety here in the extreme foreground, and we're just going to spend some time refining some of the contrast and bringing out some of the details by insinuating the details through contrast. We'll pull in some of those light values in the foreground, toning down some of the dark values in the foreground before going back over with an extremely light yellow here. Now, these extreme light yellow applications are going to really pull in the illusion of light here and again, add more variety to the color. A bit more of our medium yellow is applied here, again, toning down some of the contrast, before switching over to a light yellow green here as we make our final adjustments to the road, the poor excuse for a road here in the foreground. Then just a touch of some lighter red purple here, pulling the pastel over the surface in a linear fashion to replicate the linear shapes that we see in this area. And then we'll apply a little bit of a lighter yellow-green here to indicate the grassy section in between the tire ruts. And then a bit more shadow here right on the edge of the yellow field. Now a bit of a lighter purple here to indicate the highlights in this section. And you can see just how much we don't have to spell out that this is a road. We're only concerned with shapes of color and value, and our viewer's mind will put this information together when they see the image in totality. Now a bit more of a more primary yellow is added, again just for additional variety in this area. You can squint your eyes at the photo reference to see all of these different yellows and all these different values if you have trouble seeing them without squinting your eyes. A few more indications of some stronger highlight is added to the middle ground, and then I've spent about an hour on the piece, so it's time to remove the tape, revealing our 1 hour sketch of a landscape using pastels.
Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Now, if you want to take your drawing and painting skills to the next level, then you've got to check out what we've got going on over at thevirtualinstructor.com. Specifically, our membership program. The membership program includes all of our drawing and painting courses, which are step-by-step videos, which include step-by-step and illustrated ebooks that go along with each one of the lessons. We also do weekly live lessons, which are broadcast to members, and they're all recorded and stored in our vault, so you can go back and watch any of the live lessons that we've ever published. There's weekly critiques, which are part of the Members Minute. And if you're an art teacher, there is a year-long curriculum, which includes everything you need to teach. It includes all the resources, videos, everything. It even tells you what you need to do for each lesson. Everything is planned out for you. You can check that out at thevirtualinstructor.com. I will leave a link in the description below. You can check out our program for free for a week. Everyone starts out with a week-long trial for free. Guys, the program is expansive, but it is also very inexpensive. So I would highly recommend that you check that out. Now, if you want to just check out 3 of our course videos and ebooks for free, you can do that as well. I'll leave a link in the description below for that as well. That will put you on our mailing list, and you will get a ton of free lessons sent directly to you. So thanks again for watching, and as always, I wish you all the very best in your artistic success.